I've been bringing my plants out kind of slowly as it's a really cold morning today. It's got down to like 30 something, and though the sun is out, it's shining, and I'm bringing my plants back out. My tomato plants, if I'd have left them out, would have froze overnight, kind of like the way part of my Pepsi did. We call that natural refrigeration. Man, that tastes good. But you know, I was thinking this morning when I was bringing the plants out, what a privilege it is, what an honor, and what a reason I'm given to be really humbled by God allowing me both the privilege and the honor to share Him and represent Him in a world that really doesn't have a clue who Jesus is. I was considering well the words that Paul said when he said something about, I am a debtor to all men. You know, I like that, because you see, there are people out there that sometimes act as though the ministry or the church or people or God owes them something, rather than we are allowed to participate with God in what He's doing. Because in my mind, I see the greater being the more important than the lesser. God being He who is greater than I am, being the one who allows me, the lesser, to participate with Him in the greater good that He's doing for all of mankind. And as such, I don't have the time or the energy or even the will, to participate in things that don't honor Him or don't glorify Him. I had the privilege of seeing lots of men of God, start off well, do some phenomenal things. And then sometimes along the way, I've watched them fall. I've watched them stumble. I've watched them fumble the ball, so to speak. I've seen men become like Saul, where they should have been dynamic men of God, and yet I've had even a pastor of all people jump in my face and accuse me and make all kinds of accusations that brought me to tears. I stood there and cried, thinking, how could such a man of God fall from grace? And yet, onward he went, and he's gone on, and he's in the ministry, and he'll do well, and God will bless him. But I kept thinking, man, is this what David felt when he said, look, don't touch God's anointed. Don't mess with Saul. Let God take care of him. You be with the Lord. Because if God has anointed you, if God has given you the privilege of sharing the Word of God, then recognize that it's an honor and a privilege. It's not something that God owes you. It's not something that you get to pick and choose. It's something that God does. Because many are called, but few are chosen. If God has chosen you, then recognize that you may live by grace and you may exist by the mercy of God, but it is His mercy that we are not consumed. Not because He owes us anything. He could wipe us out just as easily as poof. And He doesn't have to have an explanation for it. None whatsoever. We exist, we live, and we move, and we have our being by His divine sovereignty. Sometimes I like remembering that, because even though He's my Father, and I love that part of Him, I do recognize that He is God, and that He's greater than I am. That anything that I have, or anything that I do, or all that I live, I still answer to a holy, living God, who not only lives inside me, but is causing me to become like someone He respects. Which amazes me, because He loves His Son. And He loves His Son so much that He wants me to be like His Son. So He adopted me and brought me into His family and said, I want you to be like this man, this God, this part of me that I am, which is love. And I think about that, especially on days like, Good Fridays, or any kind of day of the week, really, because it doesn't matter whether it's a Easter season or if it's a winter season or a summer season. There are different times that God just kind of makes me think about, wow, there but for the grace of God go I, as we like to say in the expression. But I like to say, there in the grace of God go I. Because, you see, when I see someone else failing and falling, I do see myself, because I have failed and fallen. I have seen what the consequences of my own actions can do to everyone around me, without them knowing that it was me who affected them. That's awesome, holy responsibility. It kind of gets to you, you know, deep inside, if you have any kind of tenderness at all. I know there are always these times where I see people, you know, oh, so shook up about, oh, wow, you know, our soldiers have gone out and, you know, lay down their life to protect the country, you know, and I say, well, that's nice, you know. So they died for freedom and all that good stuff. You know, and I see people get all worked up about, you know, like 9/11, the disaster, and they want to make a memorial, you know, and I think, well, yeah, you know, that's important, that's good, you know. But then I see when Jesus died, the ultimate sacrifice, when he didn't have to. When I see that Jesus gave his life when he didn't have to, but he obeyed his Father's will. When I see the perfect example of what I ought to be, I can look at 9/11 and say, huh, that's chicken feed. I can look at any soldier's life and say, huh, that ain't nothing compared to the one I serve. Because when I look at God laying down his sovereignty and his ability as being God to come and love me here, now, in my place, and to let me see him face to face and to have conversation with him, that to me is the ultimate price, the ultimate sacrifice, the ultimate responsibility that I could possibly have to recognize that this is love. Not that a man would lay down his life for his friends like they do in the military. Not that someone would die innocently by catastrophe or by attack from some terrorist. But that for those very terrorists who caused 9/11, Jesus died. For the very enemies that we fought and killed, Jesus died. You see, that's the kind of love I want to be. That's the kind of Son of God I choose to serve. That's the person I follow. I know when I grew up, I was all thrilled to be like the John Wayne attitude. You know, it's like, hey, yeah, give me a gun, man. Let's go kill somebody. You know, great. I could justify that in my own religion, but somehow in my relationship with Jesus, I can't. You see, that person I killed will die for eternity if he's not in Jesus. I don't know whether I would shoot the guy or witness to him, because in reality, my calling and election is to put down my gun and to save that soul from hell, no matter what the price. If it requires me to die that that person might go to heaven, then it would be that I would share with them the gospel of Jesus Christ, because that is what the sacrifice is, that we give up our lives for the sake of those who even despitefully use, abuse, and would crucify us. Because if they've done it unto my master, then likewise they will do it unto me. You may not see it the same way. And you know, that's okay, because the awesome responsibility that I have before a holy living God is so much tenderized by the very fact that he was willing to die for me, that I'm not worried about whether you get it or whether you got it. The only thing I care about is whether you live with him in eternity. After that, you can do and pretty much choose what you want to do with your life. You have the opportunity to waste it, to spend it, to use it, to abuse it, to confuse it, to do just about anything you want to inside of grace. There will be an accounting, though. And at some point in time, God will say, hey, you know, I think that, you know, I don't know you. Or he'll say, I know you. Or he'll say, hey, you know what? Maybe you didn't do so good, but you know what? I love you anyways. So I accept you just as you are. I'll take you in no matter what. God bless you. We all get the same reward. You may not realize that. But the more that you become in love with God, the more you realize this awesome responsibility that we have to really share Jesus accurately, to not be caught up in the flesh at times, you know, and fail, to not stumble into sin and cause others to fumble over us, the ball, and forget what they're supposed to be doing, when we could have lifted them up and shared them to God by holding them up and propping them up as best we could with our own bloodied hands from the very scars that they put on us, the very enemy that crucified us, that we now have loved into the kingdom of God. That I see as what Jesus did. Because of that, it makes me really humble, because I kind of get amazed that I could know this, and I see so many not teach that I could participate in this, and I see a lot of people not really getting it. They don't really kind of grasp it. They're still kind of like in that, barking dog stage where they're barking at each other, that every time something comes up, they got to, you've seen them, like, oh, something comes up and it's the end of the world, or, somebody's got, ministry to the Muslims, oh, somebody, doesn't do the way you want them to, they're always barking, doesn't matter what it is, any little noise, and you just got to yap it, it's yap, 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 yap. It's a yap trap. And a lot of people get caught up in that. But I always look at that and I say, yeah, they are dogs. And just like dogs are lovable at times, even though you got to scoop up, their poop, because you better be carrying a pooper scooper, and a little baggie, because wherever you go, most of the public wants you to clean up their mess because they are with you. That I find that's kind of what we're supposed to do, clean up each other's mess, because we don't look back so well. We don't pay attention to where we're pooping. We don't pay attention to what we left behind. Often we press on, ignoring sometimes the hurt and tragedies that we've left in our wake. I know for myself, I think about my life, and I think about all the times I've been married, and I've been married more than once, and the good that I did with those wives and the bad that I did. Some of them went off, and slept with other men and did things, but I don't look at them as being guilty. I look at me. Had I loved them more, what would the cost of their salvation have been had I paid the price of completing the work that God had given me to do in their life? Maybe they would have stayed and not run off. Maybe they would have been more of a Christian than what they were. Maybe they would have accomplished something that with me I might not have known. But then I also look at the same time, thank God that I went through the experience, that I might, in my failings and fumblings and stumblings, I could use that experience to talk to other people who likewise have failed and fallen. And I say, wow, I understand where you're coming from. Let me love you. Let me tell you, it's okay. You can go with God still today. God doesn't stop loving you because you failed in your marriage, in your life, in your children, in your job, in your ministry, in your work, in your play. God doesn't stop loving you. He never has stopped loving you. He loved you before the foundation of the world. He doesn't stop using you, even as he didn't stop using Saul, though the spirit had left Saul at times, and a troubling spirit Saul let come in. God doesn't stop using you in your ministry. You could be pretty much a jerk, or an idiot, in your ministry, and kind of messing up people, but God won't stop using you, because till the day you come and stand before him in accountability, God will still choose to use you to teach you who he is. Now, you may not always get all the understanding about it any more than I always know exactly what God is doing. That's kind of why we're told to use Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 in our ministry, to trust in the Lord with all our heart, to lean not in our own understanding, to in all our ways acknowledge him, let him direct our path. It's also why we're told that be careful what you do with every single person out there, because inasmuch as you've done it to the least of my brethren, you've done it unto me, Jesus said. So how you treat others is how you're treating Jesus. And also when he said that, hey, when you open the door and let someone in, you may be entertaining angels unaware. So there may be angels that look like people that you're dealing with. So the enemy that you choose to shoot and kill and murder and slaughter and wipe out in the name of God just might be an angel that you set free, that he will testify, yeah, that's the man that killed me. Whoa, really? Lord? I thought I was supposed to do that. That's the one Jesus says, you shot me. Right. What do you think? Sobering thought. Serious thought. I think those thoughts because I treat the privilege and the honor and the glory of God our Father to be so important to me that I consider well exactly who I represent, being that Jesus is the Son of God, the Son of Man. That he didn't just come in order to bring another religious system that Jewish culture had already subverted and converted into man-made theology. I didn't, just decide to become born again because I saw that, Catholicism had created its own version of Judaism and put Christian stamps on it, and adapted it to the culture of its time, making it into one of the world's largest religions in the world. I didn't just jump in the bandwagon because I saw that the Protestant movement had so much to offer in the areas of social reform and dealing with the ills and ails of humanity, that I would feed the poor, that I would help those who were in need, and establish hospitals and schools and privileges for children that were undernourished and mal-educated and not able to handle, the things that society had dealt them, especially being homeless and helpless and fatherless and motherless. I didn't become evangelical because I thought that, wow, I could go out and just witness to everyone and that, tell them to go to hell or go to heaven and then just leave them to their own devices. I didn't get born of the Spirit because God said that I'm going to save you and leave everyone else behind. No, I got saved because God chose me. And because he chose me, he made me into the image of his Son. I think he's doing that with you. I think you need to think about when you consider when Jesus died, why he did. Because that's the message I have. Jesus died that I might live. What are you teaching people today? How is your ministry going? You could be still used of God. You could be still ministering in the name of the Lord. You could still be doing what you think is important to do. But are you really sharing the gospel of God? Are you really declaring that God so loved the world? Or are you just saying that he loves the world if? He loves the world when? He loves the world how you present it? No, I don't think that's my message. Because the ministry that I have, I feel very Davidic-like with David at times where I go, I could be that guy that wants to kill everyone. I could be like David wanting to slaughter things. But I think about what David couldn't do. David could not build the house of God because he had blood on his hands. David couldn't do that. I thought of that a long time ago when I first got saved, and I said, I don't want to be David. I want to have David's heart, but I don't want to have his hands. I don't want to have his attitudes when he says, slaughter their children. I don't want that. I'm sorry. That's not me. But I want to be like Jesus. So I ask you today, especially on this day, a day that the Lord has made and caused us to think about, to consider well when his Son died. Would you not want to be more like Jesus? Or more like someone else you pick and choose out of the Bible? Well, I want to be a Paul who got pissed off at Mark. I want to be Barnabas who, kind of fought with Paul over one person. I want to be like Peter, who kind of like 1 minute is righteous and the next minute just stepping in it. Who do you want to be like? Because I want to be like Jesus. I hope you do too. Because I think that's the point of why we got saved, is to be like Jesus to the world around us and to affect those people so that they would see Jesus in us. He ever liveth to make intercession. Who is he that condemns? It is Christ that died, who also makes intercession for us. Christ is not entered into the holy places made with hands, which are the figures of the truth, but into heaven itself. Now, as he has entered there, to appear in the presence of God for us. If any man sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ, the righteous. There is one God and one mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus. Seeing that we have such a great high priest that is passed into the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast our profession. For we have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted, just like we are. Yet he was without sin. Let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy, and find grace to help in time of need. Through him we have access by one Spirit unto the Father. Why are we in ministry if it is not to console, to comfort, to extend mercy and grace to the world? Why would we have any other ministry except that with which God has done in his Son? Because if you have any other ministry than that, you really don't have a ministry.